was political attention. You got the alarm sensors not set right. You've got an issue that was all over the papers when I first started reading this about these brake rules. Pneumatic brakes should have been on here. The fact of the matter is that was an Obama administration rule that Trump rescinded. Okay? Whether he should have or not, I'm not getting into that, but he was smart to be here because he was in the political crosshairs when everybody thought it was the brakes. That regulation didn't have a thing to do with why we're here. I'm just here to tell you. Okay? So, with respect to the brake regulation, you could have pneumatic brakes and still have a failure because of this particular fact, okay? But there's all sorts of stuff about rescinding rules, this, that, the new legislation, don't put it back. You know, I think it's good legislation, but the threshold of the rule under the Obama administration is there had to be at least 20 train cars of highly flammable liquid. And here, highly flammable was determined to be 3 cars, which, by the way, was the controlled burn, okay? Non-issue number 2. Norfolk Southern killed a bill that would have required at least 2 members of the crew in every train in America. Okay? And frankly, I like the idea of having more than one guy there. I mean, this train somehow rolled down the track for 30 miles and nobody knew that it was on fire. So, you know, but this issue about whether there should have been 2 in there doesn't have anything to do with why we're here. Because the bottom line is while the rail workers want it to happen, and I think it's a good thing, and Norfolk Southern killed the bill, we know that we had 3 people on this crew, okay? So that wouldn't have made a difference. The new bill says at least 2, okay? And I think it's a good thing, but that's not why we're here, all right? All right, why we are here from your perspective is you have been exposed to some of the most deadly chemicals ever invented by mankind. Let me just take you through what was in the stuff that you've been exposed to, okay? We have very good data. Car by car by car, which of these chemicals was with which car, which one was derailed, which one burned up, which one emitted. We know exactly what it was. Let's talk about the big boy first, vinyl chloride. The same thing that killed that nice lady in New Jersey a decade ago. As we look at vinyl chloride, there were 5 tanker cars carrying 115,580 gallons of it. And it is a flammable toxic gas that's used to make PVC pipe. As you know, a couple days after the derailment, the decision was made to do a controlled release of 1.1 million pounds of it. That was that big Hiroshima-like cloud that you saw. It's been termed one of the worst environmental disasters in American history, and vinyl chloride is the main problem. It's highly mobile in soils and waters, and I'm going to bring a hydrologist up here to talk to you a little bit about some concerns that he's got over in East Palestine. And then there's some people that says the chemical should be banned. It's so dangerous. Okay? The International Agency on Research on Cancer of the World Health Organization does what's called IARC monographs. They've got a big section about vinyl chloride causing cancer in humans, 2 different kinds of liver cancer, lung cancer, neoplasms of the connective and soft tissue, that's the stuff that connects you, tendons and stuff, and other cancers. OSHA has rules. If you're dealing with vinyl chloride, it's so dangerous you got to put up this sign to warn your workers. The federal government makes you put up a sign that says vinyl chloride may cause cancer, which is why I'm a little worried about everybody coming in, oh, it's fine. Why do we put this sign up? The EPA, who's been here the last few weeks, has put out, since 1975, learnings that say cancer is a major concern from exposure to vinyl chloride via inhalation. I can't see any of you because of the lights, but my friend that rides the motorcycle, that feels terrible every time he rides it, he feels that way because whatever he's breathing at high speed is going in and disturbing his system, okay? It's readily absorbed from the lungs. In other words, it gets from the lungs into the bloodstream in effect, and these are the effects, and they fit like a glove from what I've been reading about the complaints that locals have been having, okay? It's because you've been breathing this. One other thing that I'll tell you, one of the big things that a lot of these class action lawsuits, I'm not a class action lawyer, I represent individual people who choose to hire me. But in a class action, a lawyer can get one client and say, oh, I represent everybody, and we're going to do all these great things, whatever. But the bottom line is that these class action lawyers are seeking medical monitoring, which I'm in favor of. I think it's a good thing, okay? You've been exposed to a known cancer causer. In the United States, we don't die of cancer. We die of undiagnosed cancer that metastasizes. There's a difference. Our science is so good. And so the concept behind medical monitoring is when you know people have been exposed to a carcinogen, cause the person or the company that caused that exposure to pay for systematic testing called medical monitoring. So that if somebody does get cancer, we catch it on the front end where it doesn't kill them. Okay? As it happens, if you go to the Code of Federal Regulations, 29 CFR 1910.1017, when somebody is exposed to vinyl chloride in the workplace, a program of medical surveillance shall be instituted. The employee gets an opportunity for exams and tests performed under the supervision of a licensed physician and shall be provided without cost to the employee. Now, last topic about politics. Squeaky wheels get the most grease, and I hate to use that analogy in a railroad case. But you need to raise absolute hell in Washington. Okay? Anybody that's ever talked to a congressperson or a senator will tell you for every letter they get, they presume there are 100 people that feel the exact same way. Imagine if everybody in this room wrote a letter to Sherrod Brown, wrote a letter to J.D. Vance, wrote a letter to the congressman who's done a better job being here, and say, guys, I want physician-assisted medical monitoring. I want testing dollars. I want to know what's in my blood, what's in my urine, what's in my water, what's in my soil. And I don't have the money to pay for it. There is a discussion about Congress allocating dollars to the citizens of East Palestine and Columbiana, the people that were exposed. And that can come in different formats, okay? It can come from the standpoint of liberating resources so that you all can get tested as often as we think you need to. They certainly do it when you have exposure at the workplace. Second chemical, butyl acrylate. One of its makers, Mitsubishi, says it's a raw material for fiber processing agents, adhesives, coatings, plastic, acrylic, rubber, and emulsions. It irritates the skin, the mucous membranes, the upper respiratory tract, the digestive tract. It causes headache, dizziness, tiredness, nausea, and vomiting. You can read right out of the local paper. Okay? People were exposed to this. Rashes, itches, swelling, trouble breathing, tingling of the hands and feet, dizziness, lightheadedness, chest pain, muscle pain, or flushing. You're breathing this stuff, which is why you have these conditions. Ethylene glycol. It's antifreeze. Now, I was raised by an only child who didn't know how to work on cars, but even my father was successful in teaching me not to drink antifreeze. Okay? It's a solvent used in the paint and plastic industries. My parents didn't even need to teach me not to drink paint. Okay? But ethylene glycol can cause death if swallowed, harm to exposed workers. If it can harm exposed workers, it can harm exposed citizens of this county. Okay? There's a study done by a researcher named Pataka. This metabolite, in other words, when it burns, of ethylene glycol damages the brain, the liver, the kidneys, and the lungs through a phenomenon known as metabolic acidosis. It can cause profound shock, organ failure, and death. 2-ethylhexyl acrylate. Mitsubishi makes that as well. It's acrylic acid. It's used for adhesives, coatings, construction materials, acrylic rubber, and emulsions. Here's all the conditions that it causes according to the Environmental Protection Agency that's telling you everything's great right now. I don't know, I believe you. Isobutylene, it's used for lubricants, adhesives, coating materials, sealing material, electrical insulation. Don't eat your electrical wires. Asphalt, walk on asphalt, don't pick it up and eat it. It's not good. The people that make it say that this product may displace oxygen and cause rapid suffocation. And then lastly, benzene, the one you all know about. It's a well-known cancer causer. The International Agency of Research on Cancer for decades have said it's a carcinogen. It's used as an additive to unleaded gasoline. Again, don't drink unleaded gasoline. So it's bad to be exposed to it, right? They make us put up signs. It's a cancer hazard. Of course it is. It causes leukemia. Increased incidence of leukemia have been observed in humans occupationally exposed to benzene. The EPA, IARC, all of the different agencies that study these things say it is a known carcinogen, a known human carcinogen, not just based on animal studies. We know it from data. Last one is dioxin. That was not being carried in the train, but when all these other bad things are being burned up through the combustion process, dioxins are created. And dioxins are a chemical known to cause cancer, birth defects, and other reproductive harm. All right, so that is the soup of horribles that you were exposed to. So what do we need to do? There is a difference. You just got to trust me on this. There is a difference between the court of public opinion and a court of law in federal court. Okay? You have a job to do with respect to both. In the court of public opinion, you need to jump on every one of those politicians until that bill that just got introduced includes money to get you tested immediately and persistently, and to get all that crap out of your soil and out of the water and the like. But in a court of law, I've got to show up with evidence. Before last Friday, when we screwed up the second overflow room, again, I'm sorry, we put up a website, EastPalestineJustice.com, and the reason we did it was to let you know we were coming and to tell you to click here for registration and then click here for a location of testing sites within 50 miles of East Palestine, Ohio. I wanted the list of labs for diagnostic testing to you as quickly as possible. And I'll explain the case why, but I want you to get tested yesterday, okay? If you're in Ohio, there's lots of Quest Diagnostics, there's lists of them. This PowerPoint will be on the website. Just go get tested. Your blood and your urine. I'm not saying it's going to show up or not, but if it's not there, you'll get some peace of mind. If it is there, you know you've got something to deal with. In Pennsylvania, there's a whole bunch of them as well, okay? If you can't afford the testing, take urine samples and date them. The reason is that in prior benzene release cases, I know that benzene specifically only stays in your body so long and then eventually you dissipate it. And so you can't prove that it was there. It can cause cancer between 1.5 and 15 years later. But I have to prove it was there in a court of law. Okay? It's not enough that you were around and you say you were exposed. I've got to prove it was there. So test your blood, your urine if you can. And then I want to give you a little bit about the people who collected all this information. There's 3 law firms involved. This is Tom Bevan who introduced us. He's got a bunch of lawyers working on this with us. Excellent firm. And all these folks are working with us. My law firm is called Watts Guerra. Alicia O'Neill, my law partner, is here. She helps organize all this stuff. I think she actually came back again today to interview Bernie Kozar's sister, who's agreed to help us. Bernie showed up on Friday, God bless him. And he's just been great. My partner, Jay Henderson, my partner, Paige Bolt, is in the back here, ready to go to work. Doug Boxer is here. His partners, Gary Morrow and Michael Bernard with Sunridge Legal. They're all working on this. And then, of course, we've got non-lawyer consultants, including Aaron Bob Bocock, who is a water expert, a hydrologist, and then I've got a medical doctor that works for me. He's been working on all the toxicology for this. Bob, are you around? I can't see anybody.
Right here.
Come up here for a second and just tell them a little bit about what you observed over in East Palestine with respect to the water, if you would.
Sure, thank you, Michael. I want to take a brief moment of time with you guys and talk a little bit about kind of what's going on, because when Aaron and I first got approached about this, within hours of the first fires and the derailment before the burn pit, we were a little upset. We started trying to figure out what was going on. When we took our first trip out here, we were pretty angry. I don't know if Michael's got there's the video of what's going on in the creeks around here, the aeration. That made us pretty mad. Today I came into town, we had lunch with a number of the community members, visited some sites, walked the park, went to the well sites. Now we're pissed off. And I guess the easiest way to say it is the placation you're all suffering from the government agencies that have a responsibility to address your concerns. And what I mean by that is, when we were here last week, we talked about, this dioxin dust is getting into your houses, and some of you are going to need house cleaning by professionals. The railroad's hired professionals, they've sent them out. I've seen what they're doing. It's about as dishonest as you can possibly be. They're literally taking pesticide packs from Home Depot, jumping in a white suit, going into the houses, and literally fogging them with chemical. And I'm thinking, you're supposed to go in there and wipe dioxin up. You're not supposed to go in and fog with chemical. The lady whose house this was actually provided the material safety data sheet that they gave her with what they were basically fogging her home with. It was disinfectant. It was organic disinfectant. Why would you disinfect a house that is covered with black soot from a dioxin-driven fire from the vinyl chloride burn pit? I mean, it was just that placation. Aaron and I walked out of the restaurant. We were approached by some of the press, and we were asked questions. And there was a gentleman from the press who was very challenging, and he said he had just had a conversation with the State of Ohio Department of Environmental Protection, and what was going on in the river was not aeration, as I had described it. I was describing it, and everyone go home and Google it. It's on the Ohio website. They're aerating the creeks. But this gentleman proposed that, in fact, what they were doing at this location was they were vacuuming off the chemical from the soil, and the aeration process was encouraging the formation of certain bacteriological, and this is a process that's done in science where you can actually aerate bacteria, get them excited, and they will consume or eat these types of chlorinated carbons. But you don't do it in this temperature, you don't do it in this setting, you don't do it the way that they were doing it. So he challenged me, so I kind of questioned myself and walked over with another air expert that we have here with us, and we looked at the systems, and sure enough, they're just pumping from over here, putting it in the pump and spraying it back into the creek right over there. It's simple aeration. When that happens, those chemicals are just going into the air. Aaron will tell you, I'm a skeptic. I really feel for what you guys are going through, but I always test but verify, look at these things and look at them really, really hard. And in doing that today, an air expert, some of you have read about Carnegie Mellon and the testing that they were doing with a piece of equipment. Our air tester wrote the standard for use of that equipment, and that piece of equipment that is now at Carnegie Mellon was under his care for over 10 years. So we got the guy that actually knows how to do it, and he comes from the state of Ohio. We walked out around that creek, and we smell it. As Michael was describing, you're feeling it in your upper respiratory system, in your throat. It's been almost a month. You can't make this up. You are being placated. They're spraying disinfectant in your homes. They're telling you, stay away from the creek, but we're not really doing aeration. He actually said, I said, what they need to do is they need to take those tanks over there and they need to do the aeration in the tanks and then do off-gas treatment. And the reporter challenged me back and he says, that's exactly what they're doing. We walked over and the tanks, the lids were off, all of them. And the pipes had been disconnected. They're not doing that at all. So it's this placation is causing me frustration for you, and we're hearing your stories, and we want to give you answers. I understand in Ohio we can't stand around and answer a whole bunch of questions for you, but one-on-one as a scientist, not a lawyer, I can't answer your questions. And I would like to tell you what our objectives has been since we've gotten involved, and that's to get you answers. We are working with the city, and we are trying to get a water treatment system on in the city. I will tell you, knowing what I know now, those chemicals are going to show up much sooner than later, and we need you to have that water treatment equipment on now. So I will tell you, the mayor and his staff, we visited with them this afternoon, are working on that. We're going to try to get that equipment on. We said clean the houses. We didn't say go in and fog them with, some Febreze or some Lysol. That's absolutely insane. But we're trying to get these things done and trying to get out ahead of them. One of the other things that we're trying to do is over where the derailment actually occurred, where they dug the burn pit, is go over there and start an extraction well field where you actually start sucking the contamination out in the concentrated area, creating a second cone of depression where the water will go in that direction and not towards the city's drinking water wells. But we need to evaluate where all the private wells are, because we've learned there are a lot of private wells in that particular area. So whether the government wants us here or not, we are here to help, and we are here to provide real science-based solutions to help you mitigate this problem. It is not going away. I've been saying, and I'm consistent, that the dioxin contamination, the smoke, the soot that's in the soils, I mean, for those of you that have seen, whether you've seen it online or you've seen it on television, that black cloud over this entire community is something you look at with great awe. And it's very, very frustrating that they can downplay it. It really did impact you. That soot from that smoke is going to be an environmental problem for 5 to 10 years. The chemicals in the groundwater system that float on top of the water, the dirt between the surface and the water is called the vadose, is approximately on average about 25 to 30 feet. The migration, because of the creek system, they rise, they fall, the pressures change, is going to cause migration in unusual patterns and rapid patterns. The state of Ohio has said through your source water protection plan that those chemicals in the water, that the aquifer doesn't provide any protection because the migration is so fast that the contamination can occur at such a heavy rate. You heard Michael, you heard Aaron talk about various things that we've been involved in. We've been involved in hundreds of communities like this, and we've felt the pain, and we want to make sure that you have the answers. We're not here to placate you. This is going to be a long, long, hard road. I equate this to a story of a situation that Aaron and I were involved in 11 years ago, just across the Pennsylvania border in New York. A train derailment occurred in 1970 with a similar chemical to vinyl chloride called TCE, which was a solvent. One rail car of 35,000 gallons, not 4, not 5, 1. That rail car spilled. The railroad company went out, dug up some dirt, swept up some chemicals and swept up some stuff, put it in barrels. They put 250, 55-gallon drums in the bushes. And they walked away until 2011 when Aaron and I were there for an unrelated matter and said, what's in the bushes over there? And we went in and we found those 250-gallon drums full of vinyl chloride TCE-like chemical, and it had rusted out, and the chemical had all gone right back into the environment. They had just abandoned it. Now the perspective and what I want you to understand about this story is through, you hear the EPA say, we're going to hold them accountable and they're paying for everything and we're going to invoke Superfund. The way Superfund works in this country, it will take decades before you get any real action. Decades. So they go through a remedial investigation plan, they go through a site assessment, they go through all these things. Do you know when the US EPA order for cleanup of the Leroy-Lehigh train derailment is? You know when it's due? August 2024. So if you take that as an example of a train derailment that becomes a Superfund site that's actually going to get cleaned up, and the EPA, the same EPA that's telling you we're holding them accountable and they're paying for everything today, you need to understand that same EPA is holding the feet to the fire of another railroad company in upstate New York to August of 2024 from a derailment in 1970. So we will be here in your community. As I said, I mean it with all sincerity. It's very frustrating for us. Aaron and I were with so many people that their lives have been upended and destroyed, and it's very, very hard to take, and it does take its toll on us. So thank you, and I'm here for questions later. Michael?
Okay, before a guy from out of state can come in here and give an educational seminar is what you guys call it here in Ohio. There's certain things that I have to tell you. Well, we've got 3 different firms working. We're not a partnership. We're 3 independent firms kind of working together on a project. Our non-lawyer consultants like Bob, Aaron, and others, we pay them for their services, okay? Because we want them here getting you information. There are a lot of good lawyers in Pennsylvania and Ohio to consider. I'm leaving here in about 30 minutes to drive to Cleveland to meet with a lot of them. Okay, we're trying to get everybody organized on your behalf. If you've already retained a lawyer, ignore everything that I've said and listen to your own lawyer. Okay? I am not allowed to give legal advice on your specific case during a public meeting. The rule in Ohio is a little different than other places. Normally, I would answer your questions all night long. I'm not allowed to. I don't know why. I don't understand the rule, but I've got a workaround on it. I'll tell you about it in a minute. I'm not allowed to give you materials while you're sitting here, but you can pick them up on the way out. Okay? It's the rule, so we're going to follow the rules. What have we been working on about this litigation? Well, we got to figure out where the case has to be filed. Let me kind of give you the update here. When an Ohio resident, or a Pennsylvania resident for that matter, sues a Georgia corporation, that creates what's called diversity jurisdiction, which means it has to go to federal court. There's a way to bust it if one of those 3 crew members was an Ohio resident. Maybe we could do it in state court, but I don't have any reason to know that yet. Otherwise, we're going to federal court. There are rules about where you file in federal court called venue rules. The venue rules say, well, the accident happened in the northern half of Ohio, and you're in the northern district. It's split up into different divisions, depending on the county where it happened. And so we know the county where it happened, we're sitting in it. And those cases are filed in the Youngstown division. So what do we know about the judge in the Youngstown division of the Northern District of Ohio, where the venue would be appropriate to file these cases in federal court? That's her name. She's Judge Benita Pearson. Here's what we know about her. She graduated from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. in 1985. She went to go work for British Petroleum for 7 years, and then she went back to law school. She graduated from law school from Cleveland State in 1995. She was apparently really smart because she got to be a federal clerk, which takes really good grades. Between 1996 and 1998, she went to work for one of the largest law firms in the world, based in Cleveland, Jones, Day, Rivas, and Poe, and she worked there for a couple of years. Then she became a prosecutor, an assistant United States attorney, prosecuting and trying criminal cases. She did that for 8 years, and then she was named the U.S. Magistrate Judge, which is kind of like an appointed judge by the other federal judges. She did such a good job in 2010. She was nominated by President Obama, confirmed by the full United States Senate with the permission of both of your senators at that time. And so she's been a federal judge since 2010. She has about 12 years of experience. Now, where do the appeals go if one, the plaintiff's side or the defense side doesn't like her rulings? Well, they go to something called the United States Court of Appeals. There's 13 or 14 of them across the country. All appeals in federal court from the state of Ohio go to the United States Court of Appeals for the 6th Circuit. And then if there's a complaint about that, it goes all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, as you know. Okay? Now, what are the potential causes of action? And I'm really going to defer to the Ohio lawyers here, but their research has all sorts of different causes of action that we're evaluating with their expertise. They're slightly different from state to state, but we look at that law. There's causes of action for something called negligent infliction of emotional distress. There's causes of action for fear of cancer under certain limited circumstances. But the limited circumstances are important, and this is one of the reasons why I want you to get tested. There's an article, and I just want to put the cards out on the table. It's called Law 360. It's a lawyer rag. It's a national rag where they interviewed a bunch of defense lawyers, people that defend companies like the railroad, and they basically say this lawsuit doesn't have a chance for all these different reasons. And they've got all these reasons, and they cite a U.S. Supreme Court case called TransUnion versus Ramirez, which requires injury in fact. I'm not real worried about that case because it's a Fair Credit Reporting Act case. Doesn't have anything to do with railroads. But there's a 6th Circuit case. And remember, the appeals go to the United States Court of Appeals for the 6th Circuit called Hirsch versus CSX Transportation. And this is the full disclosure that we're in for a fight. And I'll talk to you about that in a little bit, okay? There have been railroad cases where class actions proposing damages